You found the skeleton. How would you tell it's a dinosaur? You personally, how would you decide?
Well, interesting question. I don't know. I'd have to do some research on that.
Hey everybody, welcome to Dapper Reacts 35, there we go, debunking maps and time, because as we all know, Dan Biddle, who we're talking about today, doesn't know how to use maps, and he also thinks that time, it's hard to say, right? Because he has no idea what other people think about time besides him. So he thinks that, like, all of the dinosaur fossils ever were created in one event, and he not only thinks that he thinks that because of the flood, but he also thinks that science has determined that as well, which is... it's kind of dumb. Also, before we introduce Vishanti, I want to point out that we are just past the 68-day mark of Sal being bitch-made. Sal, if you watch this, all you gotta do is either watch the 3 videos on John Sanford, or the supercut that I conveniently put out there, not just for you, but for everyone else. Alright, Vishanti, my regular Dapper Reacts guest, how are you today? There you go.
That's how I am.
Okay. Now, I have you pictured in coffee. Is that accurate?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, it's accurate for me, too. I did not get a whole lot of sleep last night. I looked up from my video game at about 1:45 a.m. and was like, ah, crap.
I was incredibly altered. And even when I went to bed and I had crazy dreams, I woke up this morning and I was still like, wait, am I okay?
Nice. Alright, guys, so, we are about to dive right back into the Dan Biddle talk. This is from his Genesis Apologetics conference, where the only other creationist organization he could get was ICR, because ICR is increasingly irrelevant, as they just continue to deny even science that young Earth creationists usually know they shouldn't deny. Like, natural selection, or that mutations happen, apparently, as far as I can tell. They're also even more incoherent than most of the biology that comes out of places like ICR or CMI, which is... that's saying something. And last time we were here, we were hearing about the Maiasaura finds that were described by Jack Horner, although not all discovered by him. A little complicated. And at the time, I thought he said some things that weren't true, but I wasn't familiar enough with those finds to actually take a stance on that, right? Because I don't want to just accuse Dan Biddle of being wrong if I don't actually know what's actually the case. So last time he said that there were these Maiasaura nests and that there were no juveniles found. That's actually incorrect. The Two Medicine Formation, which is where these nests are, has Maiasaura of literally all ages. Also, Arthur Ams? Arthur Ams. Why do creationists never talk about how God designed tapeworms to produce millions of young, resist the immune system, and travel through many hosts? Yeah, that's a great question. Because they're like, oh, all the bad stuff is sin. Okay, well, what were tapeworms before sin?
Yeah. Or mosquitoes.
Yeah, like, what were they doing? Savage Cobra Official Per Se, for $5, says, Altered Vishanti still has a better grasp on reality than most of the guests on this show. Yeah, the antagonists guests, if you will. So also, he made a claim that sounded like Egg Mountain, which is the location where there's these successive Maiasaura nests, which also raises the question, how do you get not just one set of nests, but successive vertical nests, right? Like, multiple layers of nests during the flood. Because their idea is like, oh, well, you know, the flood receded locally. And then some Maiasaura clambered onto this mud bank, made dozens of nests, laid their eggs. Here's another thing. We find preserved vegetation in the nests. So they found vegetation, put it in the nests to keep their eggs warm. Then that was covered by water. Many of them drowned. Then it became uncovered again. So even more of them laid eggs. Again found more vegetation. Covered it, and some of the times, the young actually had the chance to hatch, because unlike what Dan said, we actually do find baby Maiasaura in some of these nests. And we actually find that they had time for their teeth to wear, so they would have had to be eating for several, probably weeks, during this. So if you think that all of that seems a little bit far-fetched under the flood model, you're not alone. DM the Air and Space's different wing for $2 says, Jack Horner, atheist and philosophical naturalist. I don't really know if that's true. It wouldn't surprise me, but I don't really care. Savage Cobra official says that Tyrannosaurus Rex was an obligate scavenger, right? No, almost certainly not. Look, we have pathologies on like Triceratops bones that are almost certainly healed T-Rex bite marks. It's hard to see why T-Rex would pick a fight with a Triceratops if it literally never hunted. Right? Like, just run away from a Triceratops if you do not plan on killing it. Because, I mean, it's sort of like a wildebeest on the African savanna, right? Lions don't mess with wildebeests until they're hungry. For good reason, because wildebeests freaking kill lions. They're actually specifically lion-killing wildebeest herds that specialize in, like, defending themselves from lions, and then there are also lion prides that specialize in killing wildebeests, and most other lion prides don't bother because they're too dangerous. Like, yeah, so. And that, of course, was a reference to Jack Horner saying that he thought the T-Rex was a pure scavenger, which pure scavengers barely exist in terms of animals. So, yeah. Anyway, Vishanti, are you ready to dive back into this now that we've exposed some of the less honest things that Dan Biddle said last time? Vishanti?
Sure.
Oh, there we go. Are you eating breakfast?
Yeah.
Nice. I'm drinking lunch, I guess. Okay, here we go.
That had just died and smash it around so that its femur, still embedded in its flesh of its thigh, could split lengthwise. But here's the most amazing thing about Jack's find. There were no young, no...
And there's the lie. Now, we played it last time, but I wanted to replay it this time just to drive home that, yeah, this is just not true. Also, it's kind of iffy to call it Jack Horner's find because it was primarily found by some other people, but he was a big part of describing the find. So, because the thing is, like, if some guy stumbles across a fossil and then calls a museum, that guy who stumbled across the fossil is probably not the guy who's going to write the paper. So.
Babies, no eggs, no...
Actually, there were hundreds of eggs. This is just lying.
Just a lie, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Youngsters, every single one of those 10,000 dinosaurs was at least 9 feet long.
It's just lying again. It's just a long lie. Astral Necomini, who's been a member for 3 months and is at the amniote level, says, humans are scavengers. You can tell because how AIG is scavenging the bottom of the barrel for things to be more phallic than. Nice. I was actually not seeing that as going into an AIG or a bag of dicks there. I'm impressed. You got me. The first half of that, I was like, oh, no, okay, yeah, cool message. And then it was like, oh, goodness, AIG is a bag of dicks. I appreciate being bamboozled like that.
It was an entire adult herd of...
So what is this model? This looks like
2005
CGI or something. I hate it.
I'm with Savage Cobra on this one. Why is it called Maiasaura, Dan?
Yeah, that's a good question. So there's a few reasons there. One of the interesting ones is, why is it Maiasaura and not Maiasaurus? Do you know the difference between those two words?
Sorry, Pop-Tarts.
So Maiasaura is a hypothetical feminine version of Saurus. And it's called that because Maiasaura is named after a Greek goddess of motherhood. Because of all the evidence of young and parental care. Like, the vegetation-lined nests, the actual eggs and young found that were in the nest and yet still had wear on their teeth, indicating that they were staying in the nest while being fed. Yeah. Turns out, yeah, there's a good reason it's called Maiasaura. And it's not because all that was ever found was a big herd of adults.
Maiasaura dinosaurs, 10,000 of them, that were bolting and running for their lives because they were seeing and experiencing something catastrophic and sudden.
Oh, D in the Air and Space Wing said that he was actually thinking about Robert Bacher, who was a Pentecostal pastor. Yes, Robert Bacher is another famous, very conventional paleontologist. No pseudoscience nonsense going on in his paleontology that I'm aware of. That doesn't mean I agree with everything that all of his takes, but still, he's not like, oh, I guess this T-Rex was here because of miracle. And yeah, he's also somewhat famously a Pentecostal pastor.
Great.
Hey, it doesn't affect his science as far as anyone can tell, so whatever.
Okay.
As long as he's, you know, not attempting to harm people in his Pentecostal pastoring, which is not always the case, but it can be, then hey, I don't care.
Something that was so sudden that they couldn't plan for it, that all the adults get up and run, and all 10,000 of those creatures, a whole herd of them, were found spread out, killed over about 1.25 mile area. Sounds to me like Noah's flood could be a good responsible explanation.
Except that the Two Medicine Formation, which is where this is, because again, I checked in on this because, you know, I wasn't expecting to have to go into a deep dive on Maiasaura last week. Yeah, the Two Medicine Formation is not made of things that could reasonably be interpreted as flood rock. What probably happened was a landslide. That's it. Yeah.
Explanation from that. So when we look at all of these dinosaur burials,
Okay, we have to pull up PaleoDB dot whatever and see if we can figure out what this is, because I think this is Mesozoic Dinosauria. So here we go. Paleo would help if I can actually put the E in there. PaleoDB. Oh, come on. Why is my browser being dumb? PaleoDB. Here we go. Okay. Come on. Being super slow. Okay. So I click Mesozoic. I'm going to zoom in here. I'm actually going to shift over the scene so that you guys can see what I'm doing. So give me just a second. Let me find out which scene is the one that just has my monitor on it. There we go. Okay, so what I've done so far is not show you the... There we go. This is what we want. So I've clicked Mesozoic, and I am going to type in Dinosauria, if I can spell it correctly. Dinosauria. Here we go. Let's see. That looks an awful lot like that, wouldn't you say? Yeah. So right now what he's done, because I want to be able to show you like what he's doing with his map, right? So we know where he's getting this. Now, I don't have an in-depth knowledge of how accurate PaleoDB has been. However, whenever I've checked in on it, it has yet to fail me. But it has not been that many times that I've done that. So, like, you know, use PaleoDB at your own risk, basically, is what I'm saying. However, the places where it puts fossils are places that I happen to know are fossil-bearing locations in many cases. So, like you see this little bit down south here with, like, Alabama and Louisiana. Like, that's an actual known Cretaceous, like, seabed there. And, like, this area here in the middle, that's a big part of, like, in the Jurassic, there was a lot of desert sand being blown in there, as well as ash falling in there because of the higher volcanic activity in the Jurassic, mostly coming from various dike swarms in California. During a lot of the Cretaceous, it was a seaway, so we get a lot of like coastal and shallow marine deposits there, a lot of which are going to end up with dinosaurs sweeping in. So yeah, that's what he's doing. So let's go back to Dan, and we'll see what he's talking about. Now that we know that this is just all the dinosaurs from all of the Mesozoic. So that's the Triassic, the Jurassic, and the Cretaceous. So here we go.
Again, this whole region in the middle of America takes up 14 states, 3 partial countries, 1 million square miles. This is the dinosaur kill zone in the middle of America. So when people ask me,
This is so overdramatic.
Dinosaur kill zone. Okay, look, man.
Kill zone.
What's the difference, physically speaking, between a kill zone and just a place where things have died over the years? Because the thing is, if you're just going to say, well, I think it's a kill zone because of I think the flood is true, well, great, that's just begging the question. Now, Pillowpunk for $5 says, this thing of cherry-picking science that supports the Bible and ignoring everything else is a big part of what drove me out of the church. Godzilla. Thank you very much for the Gonzilla. And yeah, look, there are non-science denying churches out there. But my goodness, are there a lot of science denying ones, especially in the United States?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And the thing is, science denialism usually doesn't come in one flavor at a time per person, right? People who deny science about evolution are also more likely to be anti-vaxxers. They're more likely to be conspiracy theorists. Generally, they're more likely to go in for faith healing. All this stuff. The thing is, those are the things that are actually dangerous, right? Like, on its own, if you just think the Earth is 6,000 years old and that evolution is fake, on its own, that belief is probably not going to do much harm to you or those around you. Now, there are exceptions. There are people who have done harm to things like fossils or even just, been very unpleasant to others as a result of their beliefs in young Earth creationism per se. But my biggest concern is the degree to which it then opens you up for further, even more harmful pseudoscience. And also, if I tackle medical woo directly, I get really, really angry. And I would like to not have a heart attack this year. So I'm probably not going to do it too much.
Why do you believe in Noah's flood? I say, well, 14 states in the middle of America filled with dead dinosaurs mixed with marine life. How could you do that? It had to be a worldwide flood. That's a huge, huge area, 1,800 miles, 1,000 miles wide. Definitely a Noah's flood kill zone.
But why there? See, science has explanations, right? Like,
Yeah.
Science has these great explanations. And they actually explain why the different rocks are the kinds of rocks that they are. But all you've got is, oh, I guess there was a flood. Okay, but why not dump a bunch of fossils in the East Coast? Like, we'll take a look at the map here. Let me pull the map up. Let me get the screen. There we go. Okay, can you guys see my... Well, you can see my mouse. Okay, so below here, right? Okay, sure. Like, there's going to be glacial stuff, and they think that there was an ice age like 400 years after the flood, so great. A lot of that's going to get scraped away. But, like, why aren't there a bunch of fossils down here in Mexico, right? There was no glaciers there. What's up with all the lack of fossils down here in the South? Why isn't the South full of dinosaurs? Why doesn't California, Oregon, or Washington have more dinosaurs? Why is it, if our explanation for down here, which I'm giving them for free, is glaciation, why are there so many damn Cretaceous dinosaurs way up here in Canada? In fact, all the way into Alaska. Look at this. We've got Cretaceous dinosaurs in Alaska. What explains this weird pattern?
I'm just curious. Do glaciers go up mountains?
No, they go down mountains sometimes, though.
Okay, just checking, because a lot of the geographical features that separate California from that big old streak of dinosaur fossils are something called the Rocky Hills.
Yeah.
I mean, mountains.
Strawberry Vein for $10 says, just saying, cherry picking, non-flood deposits ignored, dinosaur soft tissue, and no evidence for evolution, etc. could all be united under Arc Discounter. Yes. Now, I was going to say the same thing about Africa, but here's the thing. Africa is actually very poorly surveyed paleontologically, and that's mostly for, like, political reasons. So... I'll give Africa a pass, but I'm not going to give Washington or California or anything a pass for not having these. The Screen Geek for €5 says, had a bad day. Hopefully Vishanti is doing better. Listening to Dapper definitely helps. Don't forget to hit like, everybody, or he'll quote Bilbo again. That's true. I will quote Bilbo again. You guys are on like a 10-minute warning for me quoting Bilbo. That's how it works. All right.
I mean, yeah.
Have anything else, or should we hit play?
You're good.
Awesome.
So when we look at the Bible, there is one key verse I want to hone you in on, and it's Genesis 7:11. And they say here, in the 600th year of Noah's life, in the second month, the 17th day of the month, already it's sounding like a history book, on the same day were all of the fountains
Writing
of the
dates makes you a history book.
Yeah. Have you ever read alternate history novels?
Yeah. Yeah.
You notice how they like to use a lot of dates?
I mean, they're obviously history. It's just an alternate one.
Right. Oh, goodness.
Great deep broken up and the windows of heaven were open. So the key is that something started, the commencement of the flood started on the ocean floor, in the ocean floor.
Okay, but I want to bring you, Dan, I want to bring your attention to the fact that you said that the tallest mountains were covered by 15 cubits of water. What that doesn't say to me is that there was land successively available for Maiasaura to come on land, lay eggs, feed their young for enough time for their teeth to noticeably wear, get covered again, then for more Maiasaura to come on top of that land that was now revealed again, do it again, and then keep doing it numerous times in the same location. I don't see how that's supposed to work. Astronaut Kamimi for $1.99 says, Southern Victory is apparently real now because Bible.
But I understood that reference.
Oh, we've got a great cast of characters here, including my favorite, Andrew Snelling. Oh,
Pants on
goodness.
fire.
Yeah, yeah. And the thing is, with a lot of them, I'm like, do they know? Are they dumb? Are they just using massive amounts of cognitive dissonance? With Andrew Snelling, I'm like, no, he's got to be lying. There's no other way for me to explain it. Cyrus Cobra official pro se says for $2. So that makes Star Trek history because star dates? Yes. Yep. It's future history. Although I think at this point we're already like well into this established Star Trek timeline, and we have diverged significantly from it. Like, shouldn't World War III and the eugenics wars have already happened? Wasn't that like the 90s?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, you know what? While I do like Star Trek, I'm okay with having avoided a war between superhuman dictators.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I'm not in a hurry for, augments to be running around.
Exactly. Plus, we haven't even built a botany bay to shoot them into space on.
That's right.
These guys, this panel of 6 PhD experts, figured out exactly what that was in the 1990s. They framed a theory called catastrophic plate tectonics.
I want to point out catastrophic plate tectonic. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, are all of their PhDs in geology? Just checking.
Kurt Wise's is not. I don't recognize everyone else. Steve Austin, yes. Baumgartner, I think so. Humphreys, I don't believe so. Snelling, yes. Larry Vardaman, I don't know. Kurt Wise, I believe not. So the answer is some of them. I just want to point out, catastrophic plate tectonics still has a heat problem that would vaporize the Earth, minimum. And they have acknowledged they do not have any non-miraculous solutions. In fact, recently they found out the problem is worse than they thought.
A wizard did it.
So yeah, that's fun.
And it matches with Earth science in a way that's just uncanny. We're talking about way beyond the preponderance of evidence. They have an ironclad case of exactly how Noah's flood went out.
I mean, ironclad as long as you ignore all the actual physical impossibilities, which are really numerous. It's what it... Okay. The fact that you have a just so story that's physically impossible doesn't let you point to the just so part and be like, hey, look, see, it explains everything. It's like, okay, yeah, but there's a bunch of physical impossibility mixed in there. That's not how science works. Pillowpunk for $2 says, I'll take no World War III, thanks. Please, free healthcare, though. You get neither, probably, if you're living in the US. Vandelli1998 says, no Voyager 6 either, only 2 of them. Yeah, we need to send out more Voyager probes real fast. What's up with that? How else are the Voyager probes going to get it absorbed by like some kind of alien machine hive mind? And then that way the dad who turned out to be a real big scumbag from Seventh Heaven can come save us by joining his brain into the machine brain somehow and becoming like a star child who hopefully doesn't do anything untoward with children after emerging. Yeah. Whoops. Apocalypse Meow for $1.99 says, catastrophic plate tectonics is me at a buffet. Nice. All right, here we go.
And here's what it might have looked like when we have the fountains of the great deep breaking open on the ocean floor. This would have happened worldwide.
What's with that super floaty shark? That shark, its motion through the water in no way matches like its tail movements, and it's just weird to me. And to be fair, look, as someone who's tried to animate something swimming through the water, it's not easy to animate, but still. They did like a really great job with like the particle effects on the sand and whatnot, but then the shark is like stupid and floaty for no reason. Just don't put the shark in there. Plus, like, this is supposed to be at the bottom of the ocean. You couldn't see it anyway. Who cares about being super realistic?
There are 40,000 miles around the Earth of these linear rifts that have exploded that would have come up with jet stream of these linear rifts going all over the world with super critically heated water, causing wave after wave of tsunami to come up. And we know this because Pangea broke apart. And it broke apart catastrophically and quickly.
We actually know that it didn't break apart catastrophically and quickly, right? Because the breakup of Pangea is starting sort of like around the beginning of the Mesozoic. Like, we're getting Gondwana and Laurasia and Gondwana. Sorry, I had to double check with my brain. And so as that's happening, there are still ecosystems all over the place in both of these areas, right? And we're starting to see like biogeographic spread, where we're getting some animals are able to cross the ocean between them, and we can trace back the actual biogeography of the area. We can check like between north and south. We can get actual like what do you call it? Correlated sediments, all this stuff, right? We have this fully traceable history of how the Earth moved throughout this time, and there's no indication that it's catastrophic at all. And what would we expect if it were catastrophic? Well, we would expect things like lots of high energy deposits, turbidites, tsunamite, things like that. Instead, what we find is things like, you know, intercoastal sandstone with like tidal cross-bedding, which means sandstone that forms with cross-bedding, so like sort of like laminae, if you will, going across angles that are characteristic of tides, which means it had to have been formed over many, many days and weeks and months and years in order to get this carefully interlaced tidal bedding. We get things like fine-grained shale with no sign of flocculation, huge layers of limestone, none of which can be accounted for by a flood. So far from this being something, oh, we know for certain that the breakup of Pangea was catastrophic, we know like the opposite of that. Now, Rusty Longshanks for $5 says, I'm not super versed in Trek lore, but I thought the fusion with V'ger created the Borg. Also, AIG is a bag of dicks. So that's been a fan theory, that the V'ger is connected to the origin of the Borg, but it's never actually been confirmed on screen, so it remains just a fan theory. I think it may have come up in a few books, but I don't really read the books too much, so if that's the case, I don't know. And that also counts as beta canon, not alpha canon, which is what most Star Trek lore nerds are most concerned with. And Astronekamimi for $4.99 says, speaking of Laurasia, Laurentia is a much better name for the continent than North America IMO. I mean, I'm not going to disagree with you, but I don't think we're going to change it anytime soon. I think we're stuck with North America. So, here we go.
The continent's moving apart at about 5 miles per hour. This is Dr. John Baumgartner's.
5 miles an hour. That is ridiculous. Okay, let's just find out something. How much does North America weigh? Weird question, right? Let's see. I know it's a weird question, but oh, this guy wants me to sign up for some kind of a thing. Let's see. We have like Asia. That could also be interesting. How much does the continent of Asia? Let's see. So I'm getting here that if you take the approximate average crustal thickness of Asia, and then you get the density, and then you do the quick math, you get about 4.51 times 10 to the 24th kilograms. Moving at 5 miles an hour, I want you guys to think about what kind of energy it would take to get that kind of acceleration from 0 to 5 miles an hour with 4.51 times 10 to the 24th kilograms. Because remember, in order to accelerate that much, you need that much force. And to provide that much force, you can just turn that right into energy. So, like, yeah, that's a problem. That's one of the reasons why a lot of times when critics report how much the heat problem is, we use units like hydrogen bombs per square meter. Yeah, and the numbers are usually over 1.
Yeah, and that's bad.
Yeah, that's real bad.
Like, you're not gonna have a good time.
No, there's no way a boat is going to protect you from this model. And it's one of the craziest things about this, right? Is like, okay, you're trying to create a model to keep a guy on a boat being the origin of, like, the rest of humanity at this point, as well as the guy who's protecting all of the land animals, or at least the land vertebrates, throughout, that we still have extant, and throughout all of the Cenozoic. Okay, cool. But also, for some reason, he's bringing on all, like, the Paleozoic and Mesozoic land animals on, too. Sure. A model that would incinerate his wooden boat isn't going to help. And by incinerate, I actually am, like, downplaying it.
Vaporize.
Vaporize and turn to
Obliterate.
plasma. Right.
Deatomize.
Yeah. So there are certain stages at which different things go away, right? So at really cold temperatures, nothing much really happens. But then when you warm up, you start getting to the point where chemistry can start happening. That's cool. Then, eventually, life a little bit warmer than that. But then as you keep going higher and higher, suddenly biology stops happening, right? You can't really do biology anymore. But you can still do a little bit of chemistry, right? We're talking about temperatures like, 7, 8, 900 Kelvin, right? But then eventually you get high enough that chemistry goes away because you're so hot now, you've stripped all the electrons off all the nuclei. Because they're so high energy, they can't settle into any of the electron shells, any of the orbitals associated with those atoms. Which means, 1, ionic and covalent bonds just simply disappear. Metallic bonds, too. And, you can't have further chemistry. You just have dissociated nuclei and electrons flying around. That's the kind of level we're talking about here. So hot, chemistry stops.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's what you might call a bad time.
Yeah, I mean, and hey, if you want Earth to become a new sun,
Yep.
sure.
Now, I'm primarily made of chemicals. What about you, Bishanti?
It depends on who you ask, but
Well, I'm asking you.
say chemicals.
Yeah, chemicals? Okay. I would prefer the chemistry continue on around me. Just personal preference.
I mean, my continued survival depends on it, which makes it my preference also.
Yeah.
Model, a lot of expensive money has been paid over this TERRA model that he built because
Here's the cool thing. TERRA wasn't actually built to do this plate tectonics thing. He just shoved his plate tectonics models into it, which is why sometimes I'll be like, oh, TERRA is actually used by the industry. Yeah, it's because it wasn't developed to do flood modeling. Right? Baumgartner just shoved a bunch of flood assumptions into it, and oh, surprise, his modeling program gave him the answers he was looking to get when he shoved the parameters into it that he needed to use to get what he wanted to get. No one is surprised by this. Strawberry Main for $5 says, we should take the continents and push them somewhere else. That idea just might be crazy enough to get us all killed. Yeah, no, if we could get up enough energy to just push the continent somewhere, it would melt those continents, minimum.
people are using this model to go find oil and coal discovery because...
No, they're using TERRA, the program. They're not using the model that Baumgartner later used TERRA to work out, which is catastrophic plate tectonics. Literally no one is successfully finding oil with catastrophic plate tectonics. The last time someone tried to use something other than, like an actual oil company, tried to use something other than things like real science with like things like basin modeling, which requires the Earth to be old in order for it to work, it was Zion Oil and Gas. I know I've told the story before, but Zion Oil and Gas decided to use the Bible to find oil. Vishanti,
How'd that work out for him?
Yeah, that's... Do you... Quick question. Do you know if there are a lot of oil deposits in Israel?
Fun fact, the number is very low.
Yeah. So they bought up a whole bunch of oil rights to a whole bunch of land in Israel. They didn't strike one working well. So basically, they just handed the Israeli government a whole bunch of money to go dig for oil in places that definitely didn't have oil, and the Israeli government knew it. And you know what? I have a lot of criticisms of the Israeli government, but I'm not going to criticize them for taking Zion Oil and Gas's money. Because you know what? It's like, hey man, if you want to shove a bunch of money at me so you can dig for oil on my land where there's definitely no oil, I will take that money. So yeah, they went bankrupt. Obviously. They still technically exist. And I do think that they've actually since elsewhere hit some oil, but they did it by using, real science. Philipunk for $5 says, it's not just a rock, it's a continent. Pioneers used to ride these babies for miles.
Yeah.
Amazing. So yeah. No one is using catastrophic plate tectonics. They are using TERRA, and those are not the same thing. It turns out that you can use computer simulation software to simulate realistic things and unrealistic things. Who
Wait,
knew?
you're telling me the movies are lying to me?
Yeah, actually.
2012 wasn't a documentary?
Well, I remember 2012, and I feel like it wasn't much like the movie.
It really plans out exactly what happened during Noah's flood and where you can find those valuable resources. So he's got it modeled, and now we can look all over the world. It covers about 1.6 times over. We can go see where these linear rifts are today. This is Genesis 7:11 right on your screen where the fountain...
Okay, but what he's showing right now is not just all the rifting locations. It's just basically all the major fault lines or plate boundaries on Earth. Those aren't all rifts. Some of those are subduction zones, especially right now where we're getting like around China where the Pacific plate is subducting under the Asian plate, which you can see right here on screen. Yeah, that's not a rift, right? Rifts are areas where two plates are pulling apart from each other. So,
Like, the Mid-Atlantic.
right. Or the Great Rift Valley in Africa.
Yeah.
Those are rifts. We're seeing here many subduction zones, which are like the opposite of rifts. Not just like the opposite of rifts. They're literally the opposite, right? The continent or the plates are going in opposite directions compared to a rift. Astronaut Community for $4.99 says the inner machinations of flood models are an enigma. I mean, it would actually be better for the creationists, I think, if they were, because then we couldn't go check on them and see how stupid they are. But for some reason, they decided, oh no, because we're pretending to be real scientists, we're actually going to make a mathematical model with numbers. To which anyone who's ever checked into it has said, oh, well, these are some problems, huh? Including the creationists who came up with the model. Which I just think is just
Like, wait,
wonderful.
we just turned Earth into a ball of plasma?
God will fix that.
We might. Yeah, I mean, you know what? Don't worry about it.
And here's the thing, right? The point of doing a scientific model is to show that you have an ability to, one, take in data and come up with a hypothesis, and two, to then use that to predict future data. Catastrophic plate tectonics does not predict any future data at all. If it did, people would be using it to find things, whether it be mineral wealth or oil or whatever. Go ahead, sorry.
I feel like there's also a disconnect between people who understand why models need to make predictions and ones that are just ad hoc, stuff you pulled out of your butt to try to explain something you think happened.
Yeah.
The reason you can make predictions is that is proving you understand the systems that caused things to happen before.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that you understand how those systems worked in the past means you can use them to keep doing stuff in the future.
Yeah.
That's why they need to make predictions.
And also, another important thing about science is that you have to have falsification criteria, right? Now,
yeah.
The cool thing is, catastrophic plate tectonics does have falsification criteria. You want to know what the bad news is? It's already been falsified.
I'm just gonna go out on a limb and say the fact that the Earth is not a ball of plasma.
Yep. So there's two different kinds of things that can be a problem for your model, right? There's inconsistent data, where your model doesn't predict the data, but your model might be able to accommodate the data. It's just unlikely under your model. Now, that would include like a lot of things like the nested hierarchy of biology, right? Because you can just say, oh, well, an omnipotent god just made it look like evolution happened. And I'm, okay, I guess.
That's painful.
Yeah. But then there's preclusionary, which says, hey, this right here means your model was false 100%. Like, this data conclusively debunks your model. And the heat problem is just one of those. We do not see evidence of this heating anywhere close to what we're getting here in the model. So the model is false. Period. And the only way they've come up with to get out of this is just, well, I mean, maybe it was a magical thing. Because all their other things that they propose, the best one that I've heard so far has been hypercanes. That's the thing that shed the most heat. Now,
Okay.
hypercanes were a real thing in, like, the Permian. And they were called that because they're like hurricanes, but far stronger. Anyway. So, Jordan from Reasons to Doubt, who's been on this channel several times. I think, Vishanti, you're probably familiar with him, right?
Oh, yeah.
T-shirt and bow tie guy?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yep.
He actually is an engineer, and he did the math on the hypercane thing, right? Because he looked up, okay, well, how much does a hurricane shed in terms of heat going to space? Because hurricanes do shed heat into space more so than many other weather phenomena. And how much does it shed, like, per unit area? Okay. Then he multiplied that by 10 just to give himself, like, well, hypercanes must do a lot more, right? So 10 times as much. And then he decided that, okay, well, what's the maximum area that I can reasonably give these hypercanes to operate? And he decided, you know what, we'll just give them the whole surface area of the Earth. Okay. And then,
All right.
And then he said, well, how long do they last? Because, you know, it's heat shed per unit time, right? Well, what if it's the whole more than a year-long flood? Right? So we're now giving hypercanes the best heat shedding option that we've heard, one of the few ones that actually doesn't violate the laws of thermodynamics. So it got rid of less than 1/10 of 1% of the heat generated by catastrophic plate tectonics. Now, it got rid of a lot of heat, right? Yeah. It got rid of like 10 to the 24th joules of heat energy. However, the amount of heat that
That's
it
not
needed to get
even
rid
close.
of was like closer to like 10 to the 30th joules. Which, if you know how, orders of magnitude work, you'll realize, oh, that's a problem.
It's literally, it's
Drop in the bucket.
in the same vein as taking a thimble, dipping it in a lake and going, drain the lake.
Yeah, actually, Captain Ryan Ryder says creationism cannot be falsified because many things can be hand-waved by God in it. I came across a video on the channel, The Winsome Creationist, which is a very small channel, and I haven't really tackled it because, one, it seems like punching down, and two, most of the stuff that's on that channel is, I think, more interestingly said elsewhere. Not that it's this guy's fault, and honestly, I mean, he seems like a cool enough guy in terms of just being a person.
The dynamic field of creation research.
Well, anyway, he actually had a 25-minute video about, like, evidence and falsification and things like that in creationism, and whether or not the various assumptions, like an omnipotent god, actually just kind of make science impossible. And I'm actually thinking about covering it, because the conclusion he came to was basically like, yeah, but that's okay. I was like, oh, okay.
We're just right back to that Xena wizard did it.
Yep. So I might actually end up covering that. It wouldn't be like a long extended series. It would just be one video. And I probably wouldn't cover the whole like 25 minutes because a lot of it isn't necessary. But yeah, I could turn it into like a video.
Of the Great Deep broke open. Super critically heated magma came.
Look right there. He's got one of the rifts between India and Asia. Okay. I have a question for my...
opposite of that is happening.
Yeah, I have a question for my... We're going to start a poll.
He's... Okay, I was going to say, do you think he's ever heard of the Himalaya Mountains?
That's exactly what I'm asking the audience right now. Have you heard of the
Amazing.
Himalaya Mountains? And we'll, of course, add a turtle option. So yeah, if you guys have heard of the Himalayas, you know why at least that part of this is dumb. Also, I love that he's talking about all the rifts, and he doesn't actually have a rift line for the Great Rift Valley in Africa. Like, come on, dude.
I know. The literal named Great Rift Valley.
It's right there. Like you said, it's in the name.
No.
But no, we're not going to have a line for that one. Okay.
Nah.
Cool.
Came up and split the Earth.
Right,
and the
Tesla Ranger is so on it. Tesla Ranger says, "What's orders of magnitude mean?" Creationists.
Yeah, like, 10 to the 24th versus 30th, that's only 6 different. Yeah. But do you know what that 6 means? Because that's a big thing. Sean for $5 says, most young Earth creationists claim God used a flood to leave evidence. If you need to say God did it to explain the flood, you falsified. Yeah, that's a good point too. Because one of the things about the flood is that you got to find... Okay, if your theology is that God is omnipotent and omniscient, right? Which is the standard line for most Christians. Now, there's like limited theism things and what exactly omnipotence versus omniscience means, and great, cool. We're not going to worry about it too much because it doesn't super matter for this exact discussion. The flood is a really dumb way to get rid of the problem of sinful people overall, right? You're causing massive destruction to all sorts of ecosystems all over the place. Most of the things that were saved on Noah's Ark apparently went extinct almost immediately, right? Like, when was the last time you saw Cotylorinchus running around? Never. Or Dimetrodon, which is in the Ark encounter from AIG. Yeah, gone.
Yeah.
So most of the kinds they list as being on the Ark are just extinct. And when I say most, I mean, like, I think it's somewhere close to like 70%, right? The Ark had a terrible success rate. So you've got God, who could just blink all the sinful people out of existence and tell Noah, okay, Noah, start your family. Or start having your kids repopulate the earth, whatever, right? Because presumably at this point...
He wants to leave evidence because, trust me, bro, isn't going to work.
But then the problem
there
is...
used to be sinful people. People are going to be like, really? Where's the evidence?
Exactly. But here's the problem. There isn't evidence of a flood. There's evidence against a flood. And that's the only thing. So, God, apparently, the omnipotent and omniscient God, who should be perfect at everything, decided to get rid of all the sinful people in possibly the messiest way possible, was really crap at saving the organisms, because, again, most of them that he tried to save, he failed to save. Then, he made this flood so that there would be evidence of his judgment, but forgot to actually keep any of that evidence around. And instead, his flood just happened to make everything look like it had been a history of like 600 million years worth of just regular old geological processes. I don't know about you guys, but that doesn't sound a whole lot like an omnipotent, omnibenevolent, omniscient God.
He's just, testing your faith, #TM.
Yeah,
copyright.
Sure. Maybe that's it. That would be kind of a dick move, wouldn't it?
I mean...
Yeah, it's hard to get the literalist Christian God into a situation where you're like, yeah, that seems like a God that should totally exist and that I would definitely want to worship if he existed.
And that's one of the things that I try to push back on a little bit when I am getting into these dialogues with people who hold to that particular theology. I'm like, listen, there's no way to make this particular character of God look like anything but a giant dick. And that's a problem for you because you're claiming he's not a dick ever. That doesn't square, my friend.
Yeah. Look, if that God isn't a dick, then what did Longisquama do to deserve being extincted almost immediately after the Ark? I don't know.
Wave after wave of tsunami. We have the Mid-Atlantic Ridge.
Again, we can detect tsunamite in the geological column. There's no abundance of tsunamite on the west coast of Africa and the eastern coasts of South America and North America.
We have a bathymetric map here we can take from National Geographic. We can see what the ocean floor looks like without the water.
Markel, don't you put that evil on me, Ricky Bobby. We're not gonna blame that stuff on Hebrew Bible. We're blaming that on young Earth creationists. They're the ones that are saying this is the character.
Yeah, well, that's one of the things is there's a lot of people who have Genesis in their scripture who do not think that this, as read literally, is what they believe about God, and as part of that, don't believe that this actually literally happened, right? So the majority of basically, who has Genesis in their scriptures? Christians and Jews, basically. And we'll go with a broad brush where, like, I know that there's some disagreement. Is like, do Mormons count as Christian? Yes.
Samaritans, you know.
Yeah, the Samaritans too. Although their Genesis is a little bit different.
It is a little different.
Yeah.
Not in that part, though.
Their Exodus is more different.
Yes.
But yeah, so yeah, we'll take the Samaritans, the Jews, and the Christians. And since there's like what, fewer than 800 Samaritans in the world, I'm not going to focus on them too much. But yeah, the majority of Jews and Christians do not believe in a literal Noah's flood, and therefore are not under any obligation to think that the God that would do this, according to the literal narrative, is the God that exists. And that's even for the ones who believe in a God, which, while it's essentially universal among Christians, it's not in Judaism. And I don't know enough about Samaritan, like, ism, I guess? I don't know, to make big comments about what they believe about the age of the earth, or whether or not they even have required beliefs.
Sivadim is asking me who's the guy in the biblical talking donkey story. That's Balaam.
Yes.
And then he goes on to ask, in that one, God acts literally insane, being pacified by a foreskin toss his feet. That's a different story, but okay. And also, do people not know how ideologies work? Like, is that just a thing that it just never enters the mind?
I mean, I did not learn about ideologies in school or anything. I had to learn about that on my own.
Okay. Because I highly recommend that people who are like, yeah, but doesn't this book say this thing happened? You really need to start asking the right questions. Number one, does that mean that everything written down is intended to be read literally? And then you need to ask yourself, hey, did the person writing this down support what they're saying? Because if that's true, then we're going to have some issues with modern fiction writers because they write some pretty vile things happening and they're not in jail.
DM the Air in Space is different wing. There we go. For $2 says, if you haven't voted yet, vote Turtle, the best tetrapod.
Oh.
Which, yeah, actually I'm going to check on that. Yeah, it turns out that only 4% of the audience so far have said they have not heard of the Himalaya Mountains. Or should it be Himalayan Mountains? I don't know. You know what? Grammar, adjectives, nouns, it's all dumb. It says the guy who talks about linguistics all the time.
Right, I was going to say.
Yeah.
But also, yes, Vadim, those are two totally different stories.
Look.
And that's my intention. I do intend to discuss some of these issues and stories and narratives, but it's taking me longer than I planned, and that's frustrating, but, you know.
Like on your own channel?
Life, man. Yeah.
Which should be linked in the description. Let's double check.
Yes, I believe it is.
Both your channel and your Amazon wishlist are linked in the description.
Yes, indeed.
All right, we're going to get a little bit more Dan.
Yeah, those were...
Oh, sorry.
Hooray! Go ahead. No, it's just me plugging a channel that doesn't have anything on it.
It has a kitty video?
Mm-hmm. It does. It has my kitty.
Yeah. All right, so we're going to get a little bit more Dan in, and then once we're done with a little bit more Dan, we're going to go take a quick break. I'm going to get more coffee, and then we're going to come back, and yay.
Here we have the Mid-Atlantic Ridge with all these perpendicular kind of stretch marks going on here. This rift itself is 10,000 miles long, and we can see how the continents perfectly fit back together. And we have the same
number
creatures
there for God.
Yeah, basically.
That are buried over here that are the same creatures buried over here. It's called fossil correlation. So
yes, that is actually true. Like, if we were doing the drinking game, we would take a drink for getting something right. Because that's one of the reasons that people first thought that maybe the continents moved, is because they would find this weird correspondence at different levels, right? So you go down to, like, the Permian, or, like, the Devonian or something, right? And like, oh, there's this weird connection between, like, the fauna in, like, Eastern South America and, like, Southwestern Africa. And then from, like, Eastern Africa into, like, Australia. Why is that? Because originally people thought the continents were just fixed. That's just where they were. And so there was this idea, well, maybe there's this thing called continental drift, where the continents move around. And that was mostly laughed off until plate tectonics models started to gain more and more evidence. And then pretty quickly, in the span of like think, like a decade or so. Basically, we went from like continental drift, that's dumb, to plate tectonics explains huge amounts about geology, and it's definitely a thing.
Yep.
A Pillow Punk for $2 says, I clicked no by accident. Sorry. It happens.
It happens.
It turns out these polls are not legally binding.
Also, I really want to shout out Olivia Williams for nailing it. Olivia Williams says, that's like the people who think that the author of Lolita, being Nabokov, endorsed the protagonist Humbert Humbert. Yes!
Yeah.
Exactly.
Which, good thing that's not the case, because...
Yeah, and again, that's one of my biggest, pet peeves when I'm listening to a certain type of internet bro. Well, your Bible has all this rape and murder and genocide. Again, do you not understand how stories work?
No.
You wrote a story about this man and this young one. Does that mean that they're saying that's okay? I thought the whole point of the book is for you to see that it's not.
Unfortunately, I think that that's not how the majority of the religious people who they're familiar with, who have this story as part of their scriptures, take the stories.
Well, I just can't believe that not all religions on the planet work exactly like, Protestant evangelical Christianity.
Weird, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, it turns out that your views of religion end up being heavily colored by where you grew up and the religious context in which you grew up, and that unless you take effort to not just, if you decide to deconvert from whatever religious background that is, but then to also learn enough about the other religious contexts, that you might end up assuming that everything works the way that you think it does based on your context. But that might not be true. There's this thing called other cultures.
You could learn about them. That's a thing you could do.
But to be fair, though, it does take a lot of effort to do that, right? It's not easy. But what I would then say is, if you're not going to bother, then perhaps you should stop.
Maybe you should keep your mouth shut.
Well, look, you can criticize that context that you grew up in, fine. But maybe if you want to make generalized, sweeping statements about just all of religion that you cannot justify, maybe don't. Maybe just don't. And if you
love the people who think that they're going to make a point by going, but God said... Again, do you know how these narratives work? Because you probably should sit down, sit this one out.
All right, we're going to hit end poll on this one, by the way, with 63% saying yes, no being 5%, and the remainder being turtles at 31%.
All I'm going to say, DM the Air and Space's different wing, is if a voice tells you to do something and you just obey it without question, who's the bad guy in that scenario?
Depends on what the thing is.
If it's telling you to do violence, who's the bad guy?
Usually the voice.
Okay, sure. Not the person who just did it unquestioningly.
I'd say both.
What if a voice was like, hey, kill a kid, and then you go to kill the kid, but then you accidentally stab your brother? Who's the bad guy?
Still mostly the person who did the thing, but the voice is in there somewhere.
Weird.
All right, we're gonna.
What are you gonna do in a court? A voice told me to do it. Blah, 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 blah.
I mean, that might actually get you off on like insanity.
The evil monsters in the woods told me.
What is this? The Village?
No.
Man.
From.
Or from. Yeah. All right, we're gonna take a quick break, and then we're going to come back in just a few minutes. I'm gonna grab myself a little bit of coffee.
Man, we're about to miss the minute and some seconds. We're about to come up on the 69 days.
Do you want to see it tick over to 69 before we take our break?
Well, yeah, of course.
Okay. All right. We'll wait until it ticks over to 69.
We can patter for a minute.
Wait, no,
we got this.
You want it to go to 69 days? That's going to take a whole day. We don't have time to wait that long.
We'll do it by the end.
What?
That's
no,
fine.
by the end it'll just say 2 hours. It'll say 68 days, 2 hours.
Hey, you've already hit 10k subscribers. We can just keep this stream going all day.
I am not streaming for the next 23 hours. It's not happening. That's not how this is going to work.
Yes, exactly, DM. That's unwelcome nuance. Thank you.
Shanti's like, that hour section doesn't count.
No, it doesn't. Listen, if creationists can ignore the heat problem, I can ignore hours.
It's just days are made of 60
That's
minutes.
how it works.
That's it.
That's right. That's right.
Oh, and to be fair, for a second I was like, yeah, okay, we can wait for like a minute. I was like, wait a minute, no. I was gonna do what it just did. 68 days, 1 hour. We're not waiting the next 23 hours.
Silver Harlow, you're gonna retract that. I want to retract that.
Look, we're gonna go on intermission right now.
Okay,
be right
yeah,
back.
because we need more coffee.
Yes.
More coffee and snack.
And we are back. I actually remembered to unmute before I started talking this time. It was a close one, though. Yeah, it was really close. So, welcome back, everybody. Before we get right back into it, I just want to say, first, thank you all so much for your support. This channel is almost entirely directly supported by the viewers who super chat, who pledge on the Patreon, who join as members, who gift memberships, even buy the merch, which, by the way, there's a link in the description to our merch store. It's on Teespring. You can buy all sorts of stuff. Baby onesies, t-shirts, phone cases, stickers, blankets, pillows, mugs, cool stuff like that. All Dapper Dino branded. Which reminds me, I want to tell you a little bit about how, if you want to support the channel and you aren't currently, that you can do that besides the merch store. Which is to say, the easiest ways are Patreon and the channel memberships. Both of them get you access to months and months of advanced video viewing. So there is stuff right now that has been uploaded to my channel that is available for viewers to watch that will probably come out in November on the channel publicly. So there are hours. I think there's probably more than 10 hours on the low end that you can go watch. The Patreon, you can get a 12% discount if you go annual instead of going monthly. That starts at $1 a month. The memberships start at $1.99. At higher tiers, you can get things like I'll start adding you into the credits, or even higher tiers, thanking you out loud by name. You can get, at very high tiers, you can demand I make certain videos, all sorts of stuff like that. So please check that out if you can afford it. If you can't, and say the Teespring isn't your thing, or you just don't have the money to do any of those things, or you just don't want to, please at least like this video, share it with people who you think will like it, comment on my videos, and apparently there's a rumor that watching videos of mine consecutively can help. So if you have the time, maybe try that. Because, I mean, we all live and die by the algorithm here on YouTube, and the algorithm has been a little unkind lately. Getting a little nicer.
It is a capricious god.
Yeah, sometimes it'll just decide oh, this channel, nah, we're just not doing it. And there's nothing I can do because, the algorithm is just an opaque wall of unpredictability. So, not even YouTube understands how their algorithm works, by the way. So,
I love that it's just this arcane force that people just unleashed and have no clue what it is, how to control it, or how it operates.
Yep. And yet it's
It
still
inspires
the thing,
a lot of confidence.
Yeah, and yet it is still to a large extent the thing that decides the fates of YouTube channels. You can be putting out great content consistently all the time, high production quality, great information, and the algorithm can just be nah, no one gets to watch this. Oh, okay, thanks.
One even knows you exist.
Yep. On the other hand, you can be putting out absolute garbage, and sometimes the algorithm will just be people need to see this trash. All right. Anyway, we're going to get back into it.
We have creatures that are buried over here in the same mud that were killed by the same mud of the creatures that were living over here. That's how we know it happened.
Hey, fun fact, it isn't all mud. In fact, in the areas he's talking about, a lot of it's this thing called Aeolian sandstone. You know what the Aeolian part means? Windborne. Yeah, that's a subaerial kind of deposit. Yep. In fact, we know it was a desert in many cases. You know what tends not to deposit desert sandstone? Giant-ass floods.
I was going to say, could I guess floods?
Yeah, floods are actually shockingly bad at depositing desert sandstone. Weird.
Figure.
Yeah.
Rapidly. So we have seafloor spreading that happened during the flood. That's what it would have looked like graphically.
No, it would have all just been plasma, remember.
Yes.
I love how we're just going to...
The fact that there's a crust there, I'm no, that's not correct.
Just hand wave that part. That's not the important part. I feel like it is important. Because you're touting this model, right? You're this is the model. This is it. Your model has a catastrophic flaw, and everyone knows it, including the people who came up with the model. Just ignoring it is dishonest.
We've got the magma
being dishonest?
I know. Now, look, you can...
Surely you jest.
I wouldn't mind as much if Dan Biddle were look, this is how we think it happened basically, but there's a big heat problem. We don't know how to fix it, but we're working on it. If he'd said that, then I'd be like, okay, at least you know that there's a problem. And you're allowed to work out problems with your hypotheses or models or whatever, right? But that's not what he's doing.
You won't see this in the side chat, but it's in your Discord. Savage Cobra recommended there should be an exploding Earth emoji for any time the heat problem comes up, and I really like that idea.
How would I make that work without it moving, though? Because I don't think the emojis can move. What would it look like?
Just show the Earth in the process of exploding.
Okay. I might workshop that if he's on. Although, I don't think we're very close to getting a new emoji. Let me double check how many members I have. So let's take a look here. Go to that right there. Memberships. View memberships. Then you gotta go and you gotta hit see more. Membership level. Okay. So, oh, that's not it. What is it? Total members. Is that it? Nope. There it is. See your members. They don't make it very intuitive. So it looks like we probably need, oh goodness, 72 more members for another emoji.
Okay.
So
that's our next target goal. We could do that.
Yeah. Okay. Now the thing is, though, that as people's gifted memberships go away, if they choose not to renew, that just pumps that number back up. So if you want to get another emoji, you guys are going to have to start gifting a whole lot of gift memberships, or just joining a lot.
Link the videos so more people watch, and then those more people link it, and we get more viewers, and more people will join.
Yep. But yeah, we got a ways to go until there's another emoji. I think that the last emoji, which was the sessile tunicate, is probably going to be the last one for a while. But hey,
waste.
Hey, look,
logic, so much better.
I disagree, but hey, here's the other thing though. To some degree, you guys can help out with that. If you want another emoji, share the videos, like them, comment,
put them in front of some eyeballs.
Right. The sharing is really the big part. Put them on your Facebook, put them on your Twitter, put them on your Instagram. I don't know, put them on your MySpace.
Coming up, and it's going to be creating new seafloor that's spreading the seafloor.
There we go. Savage Cobra, kind of official.
Hey!
5 memberships.
You're on cue.
So there you go. Marianne the Night Owl, Ernex, Sinedra, Kaylee P, and Katie Lewis. We're all just gifted memberships. So there you go. We're now
Savage Cobra said, be the change you want to see in the world.
Exactly. Taking a leaf right out of Gandhi's playbook. I don't think he was talking about YouTube memberships, but whatever.
Oh, well, hey, we don't know.
It's true. We don't know. Oh, and there you go. DM, the air and space is different.
I love it.
Just gifted 5 more Dapper Dinosaur memberships. They went to Jerome Alain Jacquin, Damian McLagan, Jason Hyatt, Lesbiandria, and Lord Croc Squirrel Gaming. I say, every time I see Lesbiandria, I have to stop and think, and then afterwards I'm like, oh, that's clever.
Indeed.
Because you get that portmanteau, and I have to stop and think about how do I actually pronounce this? But then every time I'm like, that's clever. I like it. I like clever puns. What can I say?
To the left and to the right of the linear rifts, pushing the continents apart at about 5 miles per hour. So when this happens, the new sea...
Just the idea that this is going to go at 5 miles an hour would be enough to melt this. Just the friction, right? Because look at that subduction
Just friction alone.
Yeah. Trail Mix just gifted 5 Dapper Dinosaur memberships. They went to Alien Bird, SG Cruitt, Lady Lumo, Peyton Dooley, and Liska Day Babbitt. Thank you very much. Yeah, because
I'm making it rain.
Seriously. Well, apparently they really want that new emoji.
That's what I said.
Yeah. So by the way, guys,
Vox Populi Vox emoji.
It even ends with the appropriate vowel for that.
That's right.
All right. So there's now 50 new members. So if you want to get into the Discord server, which you should because it's really cool, you want to go to Discord, go to settings, go to connections, and add the YouTube account that you just got a gift subscription, gift membership from. And you want to then link that to your Discord from Discord. The wrong way to get in is to ask me what to do directly with a DM or something, because I'm just going to tell you to do that thing that I just told you just now.
Yeah. You already done been told.
Yeah. Because every time someone asks me directly, the first thing is, did you connect your account to Discord? And the answer is almost always no. And then I say, go ahead and do that, and then they get in. So just trying to avoid the need for a avalanche of DMs asking that one question.
How do you get into Discord? How do you get into Discord? How do you get into Discord?
Look, I don't blame people for asking because it's not super intuitive, but in an effort to head it off at the pass, here it is.
Floor is created, it hits the landmass and dives under. And at that juncture right there is where we have a lot of volcanism generated from the subducting diving plates.
The subducting diving plates that, remember, you earlier, Dan, showed as rifts.
Said they were all rifts.
Yeah, just putting that out there.
Showing any subduction.
Steve Reno gifted 5 Dapper Dinosaur memberships. They went to Cool Jesus,
Hey!
Tom Boogan, Jillian Wren, Kevin Webster, and Bree. Awesome.
Yay!
You have a cousin named Bree? So now,
Nice.
yeah. I haven't seen Bree in a while. Hope she's doing well.
And we have the tsunamis that are happening at this binding point right here. As the C4 is spreading, it hits the landmass, attempts to dive underneath, it binds, builds up tension, and morphs, and then releases. And when it releases...
I feel like there's something we should be seeing that we're not. Also, I also feel like the BBC is not on board with catastrophic plate tectonics.
Just a wild guess.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. They have hosted Creationists, but usually in either like a debate format or like... was Creationist Roadshow, was that a BBC production? Does anyone know?
Doesn't sound familiar.
Well, so you can find it on YouTube. It was like, they took a whole bunch of British creationists on a road tour of the United States. They brought them to various like geological formations and museums and whatnot to try to dissuade them of their young Earth creationism. And
How'd that work out?
some of them definitely were like, well, maybe, I was wrong. Some of them just got more entrenched. There was a little bit of conflict on board because all but one of them were Christian, and the one who wasn't was a Muslim. So then they got into like weird theological debates about Islam and Christianity occasionally.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. Although I do think he was one of the ones who was most skeptical of young Earth creationism after doing the whole thing. In part because, the Quran is not, even if you're a Quranic literalist, which, to be fair, is a higher proportion of Islam than it is of Christianity, it still doesn't give you a lot of details about like exactly when the Earth was supposed to have been formed, even if you take it literally. Because the thing about the Quran is very different than the Bible. The Quran is a collection of like one prayer and then like 159 sermons, basically. And so there's not like a narrative throughput throughout it. Like if you read the whole thing, there are stories here and there, but they're always given as an illustration to the main point of the sermon in question. There isn't a narrative to the Quran. So it's harder to get exact, like, oh, the Quran says the Earth is 6,000 years old. It's like, does it? Where? It doesn't. It says it was created in 6 or 7 days, depending on which part of the Quran you're reading. And it says there was an Adam. But yeah. Oh, and a Noah. And a Moses. And a Jesus.
Ibrahim.
Yeah, and an Abraham. And an Isaiah. And it also accuses Jews of thinking that Isaiah is God's son in the same way that Christians think that Jesus is God's son, which is weird.
Okay.
I'm not aware of any Jewish groups who've ever held that, but...
Nope.
Anyway, here we go.
It causes wave after wave of...
This is a question. Vadim Slamovsky Redchenko says, do different branches of Islam use different versions of the Quran, like with the Bible? So first, different versions of the Bible usually just, in terms of like the actual official canon, usually just means which books are and aren't in there. As far as I know, there are no currently operating sects of Islam that have a different, like a different set of surahs that are in their Quran versus others. There have been some question as to whether or not Surah 1 should count as a surah, but pretty much everyone says it belongs in the Quran, as far as I know. I think it is actually everyone. There are some differences as to like what order, as far as I know, the surah should go in. But there is not like a group that's like, oh, you know what? Surah the Tawbah, just get rid of it. We don't need it. That's not in our Quran. And there are some textual variants. So there's I forget what the actual like family of manuscripts is called, but like there's the one that's used by virtually everyone. And then there are some textual variations that do make it into the official printings of Qurans in a few areas in, like, I believe, Africa. The variations are fairly minor. One of the problems with the Quran is that there was an intentional recension and destruction of variant manuscripts. So the Caliph Uthman, who's one of the so-called righteously or correctly guided caliphs or something like that, collected as many Quranic manuscripts as he could, created a official version, and then redistributed that to the places where he had collected these manuscripts from, and then destroyed the other manuscripts. Very few manuscripts have survived this purge. And so, unlike with the Bible, where you have a very long, continuous history of transmission of different manuscript families, without an intentional collection and destruction of variant manuscripts in some significant way, it's very hard to reconstruct the textual history of the Quran. Now, I do happen to believe that the Quran, as it is generally printed now, is probably very close to what those texts were originally saying, especially because what variants we have are very minor. So, yeah. I hope that covers it. We have a really long tangent about the Quran. Sorry about that. Look, it's an interesting book. I've read it. I have 2 or 3 copies, I think.
Tsunamis to come up on Earth. So here's what it would have looked like here. We have like the new seafloor coming over like a big conveyor belt. It hits the landmass, builds up a bunch of tension that releases, and sends out a tsunami in both directions, causing wave after wave after wave.
I mean, that is how tsunamis work, but if you were doing that repeatedly, you'd get brittle fracture, right? And remember, this is the guy who doesn't think that rocks can plastically deform. So he thinks the only thing that happens when you bend rocks is that they crack. You can only crack that part of the ocean floor so much, and then it just falls apart, right? And that's it. But he's showing this as bending back and forth. That's not how it works. Like, come on, dude. Can rocks bend or not? You can't have it both ways.
And this is exactly why we see the dinosaurs buried in layer after layer after layer, because they were seeing tens and...
Yeah, layer after layer after layer of things that aren't tsunamite. Yeah. DM the air and space is different wing. Considering that Islam was invented by the Catholic Church to suppress the true Christianity, Baptists, is it any surprise they don't clearly support a young Earth? No, it's very unsurprising. Why would they? Those damn Catholics. Yeah, that particular conspiracy theory is one of the wildest. Yeah. And I love how there's like, oh, and they're secretly still in cahoots. Like,
yes.
Really?
Yes, of course.
Have you seen how like Islamists treat Catholics in the Middle East? I don't think they're still in cahoots.
That they're just it's a psyop, man.
Oh yeah, all those firebomb churches. That was just for pretensies.
Yes, it's kayfabe.
Yes. That's a lot of kayfabe right there.
I know, right? They're really committed to the bit.
Yeah. To the death in some cases.
Tens of these tsunamis coming up, bringing mud, sand, and debris and covering them rapidly. We know this happened because we can even use underground radar to see plates that have subducted like this, called the Farallon plate. You can go see this around the Farallon Islands.
I mean, you can kind of see it. Most of it's under the ground, and so very, very hard to see, unless, you have radar eyes or something, which I don't think you do. But here's an interesting thing, right? The Farallon plate is still too cool to have been the result of catastrophic plate tectonics.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, bit of a problem there.
That's where it happened. It hit California. The seafloor dove underneath it.
Okay, but here's the thing, right? Let's bring back the map. So, give me a second. Let me just switch scenes here. Okay. So, according to Dan, these tsunamis that are burying the dinosaurs are coming in from the coasts. Mostly the Pacific coast, right? Because that's where he says all this subduction is happening, which causes the tsunamis. And he's, to some degree, right about that, right? Subductive areas have more tsunamis than rifts do. Because there are in fact catastrophic releases of tension. That part's true. You notice how the coasts are pretty devoid of dinosaur fossils? Isn't that weird? Where's all the coastal tsunami dinosaurs, Dan? Where'd they go? Who knows? They're not there. Kind of weird. Okay.
Sorry about it.
Yeah. You know what? Maybe the West Coast just didn't have dinosaurs. Which actually, here's an interesting question. What if we just get rid of all our filters and let's see how many fossils there are on the West Coast? Like, what are we actually getting here? Okay, so we're getting a lot of Cenozoic and Jurassic. So if we filter by Jurassic, what are we actually getting out here? Like, what is this?
I have no idea what that's supposed to be.
Yeah, like, what is this? Coast, frames, let's see what we get in here. Lithology not reported, marine. Okay. It doesn't tell us who's living there. Oh, okay. We've got crustaceans. Polychaetes. No, not crustaceans, sorry. We've got mollusks and polychaetes, and I don't happen to know what Rhynchonelida is. It looks like a bivalve, but it could also just be a brachiopod because it's just in, like, what do you call it? Silhouette. So okay, let's check out some other areas. Like, hey, what's through here? Huh. So we got Porifera. We've got more cephalopods. We've got a bunch of different brachiopod groups. We've got gastropods. So that's weird. Weren't there dinosaurs living on the coasts?
Yes.
Huh. So apparently, maybe. Oh, I got it. Well, first, we've got a few things. Let's see. Heather Kuhn, for $5, is it me, or are those tsunamis traveling in straight lines? Should the shapes of the waves conform to the shapes of the rifts or radiate in circles? They should radiate in circles. I'm not going to dig them too much because, like, it's just an illustrative 3D rendering. And as someone who does that, and who would, if he had to be commissioned to, and wasn't absolutely required to make them radiate out in, like, circles and conform to the shape of the land, I wouldn't. It's a big hassle, comparatively. Command Cyborg, who's been a member for 28 months and is at the amulet level, says AIG is the bag of dicks, Ghidorah, Go, and then Dapper, Vishanti, and of course the proper sessile Tunic. Thank you very much, Command Cyborg. So maybe it's that the tsunamis picked up ocean life, which is fair, that can happen. And then it also shoved the dinosaurs inland as they were going. Right? And then the dinosaurs went inland over the North American continent, thousands of miles. And then that's where they were around so that they could then later lay eggs on the land that was uncovered between the tsunamis. And they just survived that, just like the kangaroo survived being blasted to Australia from Mount Ararat by volcanoes. I mean, why not, right? We're in crazy land anyway.
We can even use a heat map to see how recent it is. So these things are very, very obvious that they happen, and it's obvious that it happened recently. They're still happening today. About 90% of the Earth's earthquakes are generated from subduction plains here.
That is actually true. A huge portion of the earthquakes in the world are in subduction zones. It's just that fact on its own doesn't tell you that it happened rapidly over the course of a year, right? Because the problem is that's not a distinguishing thing. Both models would say that subduction zones should have earthquakes. It's not like a surprise to anyone. So, yeah. Yeah, maybe dinosaurs just didn't like the mountain climbing, so they stayed east of the Rockies. The problem is that creationists tend to think the Rockies didn't start growing until during the flood.
After the flood, yeah.
Right. So the dinosaurs should have been on the West Coast, even if they didn't like mountains. Yeah.
Where we have the ring of fire, and these plates are still diving underneath and causing tsunamis like what we see that happen in Japan.
The ring of fire is what happens when I have too many Carolina Reapers.
Here's just a static shot of this one tsunami that came in by Japan. The seafloor jumped and moved 79 feet during this subduction-related event. So the seafloor was still diving underneath the landmass. It unbound and skipped over 79 feet, and that one event caused this tsunami, and we can see how it radiated out here. That one event with the Japan tsunami that just all happened in our lifetime created this.
But he doesn't think that subduction happened. All of his little graphics showed rifts.
Well, so now he's saying that there is subduction. So I think that graphic was just not well thought out. Also, I gotta say, this right here has been used. Now, he's not doing this. I'm not accusing Dan of this, and I'm going to read out the super chat real quick, and then we're going to talk about that. Cyberscope official per se for $5 says, so that's why marsupials have pouches, so their young don't get lost or singed when they got shot out of the volcanoes. Yes. That is in fact why. So I actually have a sort of, like, I hate this graph, and not for good reasons, right? Dan is not doing this. But this graph was shared all over social media in the wake of this tsunami as if it were a map of radiation leaking from the Fukushima reactor. And all you have to do to disprove this is look at it and say, hey, what does that key say? Tsunami wave amplitude in meters, huh?
People don't read.
Weird how it's not in, like...
People don't read.
Yeah. Weird how it's not, like, in REM or Röntgen or something like that. Like, you know, the kind of thing... Sieverts? One of the units that you use to measure ionizing radiation. So, yeah. Whenever you see a map being shared, just check the key. You know?
And if it doesn't have a key on it, it's garbage.
Yeah. Actually, that reminds me of another map that someone didn't check the key on. Someone on Facebook, person I know, who's a big old Trump supporter, was sharing this election map. Like, look how great Trump's doing in the polls. And, like, I'm looking and I'm like, it's curious that, like, California and Massachusetts are red. So I went and looked at the keys, and oh yeah, red are Democrat leaning, and blue were Republican leaning.
Oh my goodness.
I'm like, hey, you should double check because the color convention has been inverted. It's like, no, I know what red and blue mean. I'm like, it's literally on your map. It says it right there. It's like, oh, I guess it does. Yeah, you honestly thought that California was leaning Trump? Okay. Yeah. Or
not
Massachusetts.
The major cities, friend.
Like, Massachusetts, I think the last time Massachusetts voted, like, GOP was, like, Reconstruction.
Yeah.
All those waves, all that pressure change went over from one tsunami slip that was sufficient to kill all kinds of people, but it was from a seafloor slip, a subduction-related, earthquake that happened that caused that tsunami to go all the way over, killing lots of people. This was happening wave after wave after wave in cycles during Noah's flood.
Oh, yeah, W.S. Wurzman is right. MA did go to Reagan at least once, yeah, in his like, initial landslide. Okay, good point. Yeah, Reagan was, like, absurdly popular in that election. I mean, I haven't looked into it, but, like, it's crazy just how much of a landslide that was. Maybe it's because they liked seeing the guy from the pictures in the White House, you know? They're like, oh, I like Westerns. I'll vote for that guy.
America, who values entertainment and centers it in way too many public conversations? Huh.
Yeah, weird.
Go figure.
So what about ash? Why in the world are dinosaurs found buried in so much ash? What?
Subaerial ash in many cases. Anyone want to take a guess as to what subaerial means in the chat? I'll let you guys figure that one out. Oh, go ahead.
Are floods known for creating lots of volcano ash?
Not on their own, although this amount of tectonic activity would create a lot of volcanic ash. But the problem is that it would be submarine ash, not subaerial ash. Yeah, but you need to account for all the subaerial ash, as well as the tuffaceous things like tuffaceous sandstone that are not marine, like lacustrine or fluvial sandstones, shales, all of which are, you know, ashy to the point of, in some cases, being tuffaceous during the Jurassic. And also, why isn't that there are significantly different amounts of ash in, you know, different vertical locations, which doesn't match the idea of just constant crazy tectonic activity.
Dapper, are you caught up on The Boys, like the TV show?
Unless it's had a third season that I don't know about. Or wait, no, what?
So if I say, you made those words up, do you get the reference?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, good.
Yep.
Could produce so much ash because we have dinosaurs that are buried under states and states worth of ash. So I've got a quick video.
What does it mean to be a state's worth of ash? Does that mean that an ash cloud covered more than one U.S. state? Or does it mean that, like, the state is
US
coated
state.
in ash?
Rhode Island? Alaska?
Right. It's gross. Just tell us the area over which you're talking and how much ash there is.
Americans will do anything to avoid using the metric system.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, in this case, even any measurement system, like...
Any measurement system.
You could use acres or square miles. It would be better than just saying state. Because state doesn't have a size. Because, I don't know if you guys know, like, I know a lot of you aren't American, but, like, Rhode Island is, like, the size of Belgium or something.
Me.
Right? And
It's
Alaska is bigger than Europe.
Yeah.
So,
Continental Euro.
you know. Benthic Tunicate B2022 gifted 5 Dapper Dinosaur memberships. They went to Logan Fisher, Narragan L, or Narragan L, I'm not sure, Stu Griffin, Daniel Glasser, and Spooky McGee.
Woohoo!
Nice. Thank you very much, everybody. Send in your Cecil
Pelagic
tunicates,
tunicate emojis.
Cecil and tetrapod emojis, which I see.
Allergic tunicate emojis.
No. Yeah, I vastly overestimated the size of Rhode Island.
Yes.
Yeah, sorry. It's bigger than Singapore. Which, I've been to Singapore. Singapore's nice. I'd like to go back to Singapore. I'm just not going to eat the jellyfish again.
Ugh.
Yeah, it wasn't worth it. There was some really great Indian food that I got there, though. Really good Indian food.
I love Indian food.
Yeah. Well, you know, Singapore's got a lot of Indians there.
Mm.
And a lot of them have restaurants. And they're really good.
Delicious.
Mm-hmm.
Here that should explain that.
Rapidly subducting plates resulted in enormous volcanism that spewed
I'm sorry, I know that we keep harping on it, but like it wouldn't actually spawn volcanism because there would be no backbone left. It would just be a cloud of ionized gas. But okay, sure.
megatons of ash that entombed countless dinosaurs in multiple states. The evidence for this is obvious. For example, the Independence Dyke Swarm is a system of linear fissures
Now, this is a real feature, but let's see what they say about it.
that erupted during the flood. This system extends over 370 miles in Southern California and belted out 4,000 cubic miles of ash that covered multiple states.
Okay, so here's a few things. One, it did do that, but it did not do it all at once. And you know how we can tell? Because we can trace the ash from it back to the Independence Dyke Swarms, and it's all during the Jurassic. But the problem is that if all this happened in like a day, you would actually get a solid layer of tuft, which is what happens when you have lithified volcanic ash. But you know what actually happens during this period of the Jurassic? You get an increase in ash content in your sediment, but it doesn't even reach like the 15 or so % necessary to say that the sediments are tuffaceous, never mind actual tuft. So how could this all have happened in the course of less than a year and only result in very extensive layers of just a little bit extra ashy sediment? It doesn't work. It just doesn't. And the thing is, like, it doesn't take a whole lot of work to figure this out, right? I figured it out by looking at, like, someone else claiming some nonsense about the bushy member basin of the, what formation was it? It was a Jurassic formation. Wasn't TooManyDemons. Morrison. It was the Morrison formation. Yeah, the bushy member basin of the bushy basin member of the Morrison formation. Yeah. Goodness, because I do this weird thing called reading scientific papers. Weird, right? Imagine being interested in science and then saying, gee, I wonder what's actually been published by real scientists about this topic, instead of just being like, this feels good, so I'm just going to go with it.
Leaving behind enormous ash deposits, like the Brushy Basin member.
Oh, hey! I just mentioned the Brushy Basin member. Amazing. Awesome. Okay, cool. Love it.
which is 110 meters thick in eastern Utah and
It sure is.
found in 35
Dapper, Tesla Ranger says, I'm watching at work and a customer recognized you.
Oh my god, that's awesome! That's so cool. Oh, here's the other thing, though. Now that I've had a face reveal, I'm just dreading the day that I go to the store in, like, my human costume and someone recognizes it. Like, it's gonna happen, and I'm gonna be like,
you're gonna have you got a long ways to go. I think you'll be all right.
Yeah, but you never know, though.
Let's say it.
That's the thing. Like, I know I have fans in Arizona. So, like, yeah, one of these days it's gonna happen. Someone's like, "Are you Dapper Dinosaur?" I'm like, "Yes." Can I have your autograph? And I'll say, "I guess so." Do you have a pen? Because I don't normally carry a pen. Let's see.
Why don't you just bite it with your dinosaur teeth?
Oh, Rhode Island is about 200 kilometers or square kilometers larger than Luxembourg, or about 11 times smaller than Belgium. Oh, sorry, Belgium. I always just assume that Belgium is tiny because, like, other than French fries and horrible oppression of Africans, what comes from Belgium? It's like those are the two exports of Belgium that I'm aware of. I guess chocolate. So, but even that, they have to import chocolate. It's not like chocolate trees are growing in Belgium. So, like, I guess chocolate, horrible, murderous suppression and slavery, and yeah, you know, there you go. Was Hercule Poirot Belgian? I feel like he was Belgian.
I don't know why you would ask me that, as if I know the answer.
I don't know. You're smart.
It does not mean I know everything.
Good point. But yeah, also French fries, because in fact they were invented in Belgium, not France. But the French-speaking part of Belgium.
The chat's getting you, man.
Oh, waffles. Yeah, okay, waffles. No, okay, good point. Yeah, Trappist beers, but you know what? I've got some good Trappist beers, but they don't do enough for me that I'm gonna be like, oh yeah, thanks Belgium for your monks.
other locations around the region.
Okay, so was anyone around when the Mount St. Helens blew its top in the 1980s? Okay.
Yeah, lots of people were. It made the news. He probably means among his audience, I know.
Okay, so it pretty much covered 3 states. For 3 days, it was dark. You could hardly see the sun. That was one small eruption that looked like this. Here's a picture.
Okay.
One small eruption.
Here's the thing. The Brushy Basin member isn't made of tuff, right? It happens to be one of the highest ash content members of the Morrison Formation. That's true. But even the Brushy Basin member generally has sediment that does not actually rise to the level of tuffaceous. And it's the actual sediment is vertically extensive. Like Dan already said, Benthic tunicate, by the way, B2022 for 2 pounds says AIG is a tetrahedron of tundras. Nice. So yeah, here's the thing. For this vertically extensive sedimentary column to be the result of one explosion, it needs to have a very high ash content, much higher than the less than 15% that it actually has. This is just a lie, or they just don't know anything about the Brushy Basin member other than it is relatively ashy compared to the rest of the Morrison Formation, which, to be fair, has a fair bit of ash compared to the lower and upper parts of it. And there are actually layers where we can actually see, like, here was an eruption, because there's a fine layer of ash. But yeah, the Brushy Member Basin was absolutely not the result of ash falling from one big eruption, because we have vertically extensive area where the ash is mostly not in distinct layers caused from distinct eruptions. What was actually happening is there was basically constant, but, well, more or less constant, but fairly low-level volcanism. And by constant, I mean, like probably every few months or so there was some kind of an eruption. And then every once in a while, every few years or so, there would be a major one that would then actually leave a distinct line of ash. But yeah, you cannot say the Brushy Basin member is just what's left from a big eruption. It's not possible. It's made of the wrong kind of rock for that.
Lithium, the Air and Space is different wing. This is a question for the audience.
Yeah, no, it is. Yeah, were you there? Were you there? Yeah, some people were. Oh, yeah, Coyote, he's definitely going to mention the Little Grand Canyon. Or Engineers Canyon.
That's just Mount St. Helens. Now, if you look at this video, this graphic here, this is showing the volume of ash that was produced during the flood. The Independence Dike Swarm, that was a linear fissure system in Southern California, produced 4,000 cubic miles of ash. It was all blown eastward, burying all the dinosaurs. Mount St. Helens is this tiny little blip right here, 1/4 of 1 square mile. So that's why we have heaps and heaps and heaps of ash that's covering and burying all these dinosaurs.
Now, this is a little deceptive, right? Because he's showing you these decreasing as we go forward in time amounts of ash, giving you this impression that there's just this overall volcanism was crazy during the flood and then kind of tapered off afterwards. But here's the problem. You'll notice how I said the Brushy Basin member, I keep doing that, was part of the Morrison Formation, which is part of the Jurassic. You might not know this, but the Jurassic is not the beginning of the Phanerozoic, which is where they think that the flood started. In fact, if you were to track volcanic activity throughout the Phanerozoic, you would see that it ramps up into the Jurassic, and it then starts to trail off again. The Jurassic was a particularly volcanically active period. Weird how they don't show you anything before the Independence Dike Swarm's eruptions. You know why? Yeah, because it would be lower. And also, you'll also notice that the Independence Dike Swarm is not an eruption, unlike Yellowstone, Long Valley, Crater Lake, or Mount St. Helens.
Reality can be whatever I want it to be.
Yep. The Independence Dike Swarm was a large collection of many, many smaller eruptions, most of which probably weren't much bigger than the Mount St. Helens one. Yeah, over again, millions of years. And how can we tell? Well, because they didn't actually deposit a gigantic bed of ash over the North America. That isn't what happened. How can you tell? Because that's not what the sediment is. It isn't tuft. I mean, it's that simple, right? It's basically like saying, oh, hey, what are you eating? Oh, chicken? You sure it's not beef? No, it's chicken. I'm pretty sure it's beef. Okay, cool. Like, there isn't anything to say other than that's just physically not what it is. Vandali 1998 for $5 says, what would happen to all that volcano ash if it was immediately covered up by all that floodwater? So if it was immediately covered up, a few things. One is it would get mixed back into the water, and then it would redeposit as a marine tuft instead of a subaerial tuft, which is what we actually find in areas where we have these volcanoes actually depositing enough tuft to actually call it that. It would also probably mix up with some of the other sediments and be deposited as part of a tuffaceous conglomerate or graded bedding. So, yeah. Which, again, not what we characteristically see. Okay.
So what about the asteroid theory?
Oh, is this where we're going to get to hear Dan Biddle telling us about how an asteroid killed all dinosaurs ever according to science? Because I love that claim of his.
So we will just show that real quick because I know I'm all...
So let's see. Superhero says water plus ash equals ashy drink. Do not drink volcanic ash.
No, yeah, don't drink that.
That is made of horrible, jagged bits of rock, and
that's poison flavored.
Yeah, it's full of noxious chemicals, like Vishanti just said. This poison, it's also physically going to damage your GI tract. This is a bad idea. Don't do it.
Almost out of time here. So that's in Montana where they found the largest T-Rex. That's where they say the asteroid landed that made the dinosaur extinction. But look at all these dead dinosaurs.
Extinction.
Look at all these dinosaurs. So let's do that, right? Let's open up our
Look at
map.
all those chickens.
So we're going to get rid of giraffes. I'll show you what I'm doing. Okay, so here we go. This is my map of all the fossils in... Oh, get out of here. All the fossils in North America. So we're going to go to just the Mesozoic, which is what he's doing. And then we're going to go just to Dinosauria. Nee for $2 says, AIG is a big old bag of bulging boners. There you go. Thank you. Benthic Tunicate B2022 for £5 says, I propose we petition to make the official collective noun of tunicate, or eggplant, an AIG. Who's with me? I mean, I could see that. Okay, so these are all the dinosaurs he's showing us. But here's the problem. Virtually none of them are things that are thought by science to have been killed by the asteroid. Because this is literally all the dinosaurs in the entire Mesozoic. Vince O'Connor from 999 says, Creationists, 999 US by the way, Creationists, we reject your reality and substitute our own, with apologies to Adam Savage. Yeah, that basically does sum up the creationist approach. But here's the thing. We got this Cretaceous thing here, early and late. Well, obviously the asteroid hit in the late Cretaceous because the boundary between the Cretaceous and the Cenozoic is, the whole point of the KPG extinction.
Yeah.
Okay. But now you'll also see that we get these darker green and lighter going into yellow. That's because of different times. So what if we just focus on the Maastrichtian, the end Cretaceous? Well, now we have the Maastrichtian dinosaurs that have been found, but here's the problem. You notice that the Maastrichtian isn't just a point, right? It's actually a fairly extensive period within the Cretaceous. Well, it's not a period, it's a stage, that's the word. I had to think of the terminology. The Maastrichtian stage of the Cretaceous is actually fairly extensive. There's literally only one known dinosaur fossil site that's probably actually caused by the asteroid in particular. And it's somewhere here in Montana. One. Now, I don't know if Dan is stupid or if he's lying. Currently, I'm leaning towards extremely stupid. And by stupid, I mean like intentionally so, right? Like not just like, oh, you're unintelligent as no fault of your own. I mean, you could choose to be not dumb, but you choose to do the silly thing. So, yeah. Which, by the way, PaleoDB is really cool. It's paleobiodb.org. PaleoDB.org. Very cool.
That are way, way, way far away. So if we drop the rock and simulate the Chicxulub asteroid, how in the world did that asteroid that fell way down here bury these creatures under 100 feet of mud?
It didn't.
It did.
No one thinks it did. This is just a made-up story that Dan Biddle has come up with. Or maybe one of his employees, I don't know. But yeah, literally no one thinks that this is how all of the dinosaur fossils from all of the Mesozoic formed. Yeah. It's not even how all the Maastrichtian dinosaur fossils formed.
It completely misses. So the next time you're in a natural history museum, just know it is a completely failed explanation.
Yes, Dan, your straw man of the impact hypothesis is indeed a failed explanation, which is why no one believes it.
What really happened is we have the tsunamis that are bringing in water from the west to the east, moving in a system-wide process going from the west to the east, burying all these creatures and
Weird how we don't have any of them on the west coast then, but okay.
Wave after wave of tsunamis. So on dinosaur taphonomy, I'm going to go ahead and end up now because I want to make sure that we have time for our Q&A panel. But I will say this thing. One, what really clinched it for me, and hopefully we have...
Look, dude, it wasn't anything evidential that clinched it for you. We all know it was that you had a prior commitment to a particular reading of the Bible.
Yeah.
And if you didn't have that particular commitment to that particular reading of the Bible, you wouldn't believe any of this. Because there's no evidential reason to. Which is why, again, it's curious, although not logically indicative of much, but it's curious that it's very hard to find someone who came to the conclusion of young Earth creationism only to then later convert to some kind of Christianity or maybe to some absurdly literalist version of, like, I don't know, Orthodox Judaism or something like Yosef Mizrahi. Instead,
and even he's pretty fringe.
Oh, he's super fringe. Cyrus Cobra official per se for $2 says, "Where'd the iridium come from, Dan?" Yeah, that's a good question. He doesn't address that. He's got no answer. Instead, what you get is people who convert to various religious positions that also tend to have very literalist interpretive frameworks for Genesis. And then they're like, oh, I guess I should adopt this framework too. And then they start finding things like, well, I should probably find a way to accommodate this into my view of science. And then they start saying nonsense. It happened to John Sanford. We're going to hear that it's about to happen for Dan Biddle.
have one of these in the Q&A sessions, is dinosaur soft tissue. Right now, as I stand here, there's 122 peer-reviewed scientific journals that are not from creationist publications.
Okay, actually, Vishanti, this isn't the first time we've seen this list.
It is not.
You remember what happened last time we did? We checked the first paper we came across. And it did not say what he said it did.
I was about to say, I recognize one of those names up there. Who's that Schweitzer?
Yeah, Mary Schweitzer.
I think Mary.
Yeah, look, we've gone over dinosaur soft tissues a million times. I don't think we're going to go over it in the next 5 minutes. I'm just going to get to the point where he's done with his thing. If we have any final things to say, we'll say that, and then we'll wrap it up. How does that sound, everybody?
Okay.
Okay.
Sure.
That have established not 5, not 10, but 16 different types of bioorganic materials that they're finding in dinosaur bones. This is absolutely a case-closed evidence for young Earth and for Noah's flood.
So we have a lot of great questions here. We're going to go through them. And
oh, okay. I guess that was it.
All right, then.
That was easy. I'm about to double speed, by the way. All right. Well, thank you, everybody. Goodness. I am so tired of going over the exact same point about soft tissue. It's exhausting. Yeah. Anyway,
Yeah, they just don't have anything new.
they don't. All right, so guys, one, if you are in the Discord server, we are going to be doing 4 episodes of Power Rangers Turbo following this, where I'm going to live stream it, and we're going to watch it. So if you want to, head over to the general voice chat. That's where I'm going to be streaming it too. Otherwise, let's take a look at what's coming up in the future for the channel. So, on the 27th, we're going to be doing Jackson with Jackson. On the 29th, we're going to be doing our... let me double check, so that way I don't get it wrong. What's coming up? Oh, yes. Abiogenesis Debunked. The Creationist Who Can't Math 1 out of 3. That's about Jeffrey Tompkins, who... I have seen incorrectly add 2 3-digit numbers. Yeah.
Wait,
the PhD
Jeffrey
geneticist.
Tompkins, that's Erica's nemesis.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Let's see. On the 1st, on July 1st, I'm not positive what's happening, but right now, unless something else comes up to interrupt it, the plan is to have the start into the Q&A. Right? Just continue with this Q&A. Now, on the 4th, the plan is Kent with Bent. However, as a result of some, national holiday activities that, I'm trying to get going, the plan currently is to have Kent with Bent start at noon Pacific, 3 p.m. Eastern, rather than when it normally does 6 hours later.
Okay.
That is currently still technically subject to change, but it's unlikely to change. So if you want to watch Kent with Bent, plan on it happening 6 hours earlier than you're used to.
Okay.
Vishanti.
Yes.
Other than telling people to go subscribe to your channel, and of course to go get you stuff from your wish list, got anything?
I've been doing a lot of local and community organizing, so that's throwing a wrench. Yeah.
Dr. Tapioca Weasel has gifted a Dapper Dinosaur membership, and it went to John Smith. Welcome, John Smith. Everyone eats said tetrapods and sessile tunicates.
Pelagic tunicates.
No pelagic tunicates. See, there you go.
And if you want to, you could even send him a fwing.
Yeah, wings are fine. I'm pro wing. Vishanti, that's gross. I see what you did there.
Rise, my pelagic tunicate children.
Why do I even keep you around with all these pelagic tunicates keep spamming?
Because I'm funny.
That's true. All right, so that's as much as we're going to go over. Again, guys, there are links in the description. There's the Patreon, the memberships, Vishanti's channel, her wish list, my wish list, merch, all that stuff. Thank you very much. I will hopefully see some of you over in Discord in just a few minutes, and we are going to get out of here. Say goodbye, Vishanti.
Goodbye, Vishanti.
Hey, before you leave, I just want to take a second to thank my patrons and channel members, especially those pledging $20 or above. Bob Knob, Benthoven, Tapioca Weasel, Denny5252, Elleron Teller, Phil Cavara, Ian Chen, Kelvin Brostig Van Manen, Landon Knoll, Mabdy Babby, Monkey They Them, San, Sphincter of Doom, and the Venerable Bede. It's because of my channel members and patrons whom you're seeing on screen that this channel can stay afloat. Without you, it would all shut down. If you want to join the team, there's a link to join the channel below this video, and there's a link to join the Patreon in the description. On the Patreon, you can get a 10% discount for pledging annually, and either way, you get early access to virtually all of my scripted videos, often 3 to 5 months before they come out for the general public. Thanks for watching.